Hello and welcome to Fumfine News Network. I'm your host, Daniel Dibaba, and today we have a crucial and deeply concerning issues to discuss. We are here to shed light on the horrors inflicted upon the Oromo people, Oromo civilians, by the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and Fano Amara terrorists. This issue demands urgent attention, and I will be delving right into the heart of this crisis in this interview. So, I have a special guest today, and our special guest is Dr. Trevor Trueman.
Hello, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'll try to introduce Dr. Trevor Trueman. Dr. Trevor is a family medical practitioner who helped to train Oromo health workers among refugee camps in Sudan from 1988 to 1991 for the Oromo Relief Association. He was in Wulaga training village health workers when the Derg fell in 1991. He has reported and campaigned on human rights in Ethiopia since 1992 and was a founding member of the Oromia Support Group in 1994. Oromia Support Group has so far published 63 reports on human rights abuses in Ethiopia. Welcome, Dr. Trevor.
Thank you very much for having me, Daniel. It's always a pleasure to appear on FNN, especially at crucial times like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trevor. So far, you have reported about 63 human rights abuses report on Ethiopia, especially focusing on the Oromo people. And recently released the number 63rd report, OSG report. In this report, you highlight the horrors that's inflicted on the Oromo people, and also you highlighted the atrocities committed in Tigray as well. You shed light on two main perpetrators, the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and the Fano brigades. So, what were the main findings of the OSG report this round?
The main finding is that there's been a quantum leap in the number and extent of atrocities over the last 5 years since I became to power. And as you know, I've been reporting throughout all of the EPRDF years. And although the atrocities were severe in those times, they were in a different division to what's happening now. There's been a complete breakdown in terms of respect for human life and human rights. And the security forces are now perpetrating abuses with absolute impunity. As I say, there were atrocious incidents under the EPRDF, but what's happening now is a lot worse. As you say, the two main perpetrators, which reduced the population of the whole of the empire to living in fear, and on top of the dreadful economic circumstances that Abiy Ahmed has put the country in. And the two main perpetrators of abuse are the government defense forces, the ENDF, and Fano. Fano developed similar to the Kero movement initially, but it was always violent. It began arming early on in the mid 2010s, I guess. And that's where the similarity with Kero completely falls apart, because Fano have been responsible for violent actions against ordinary Oromo people, and hence your use of the word terrorist, which I think is appropriate, because there's complete disregard for civilian life and safety by Fano. And Fano have been responsible for aggressive Amhara nationalist expansion, Amhara supremacism, if you like, and a return to the old days of empire. This is what we see on social media from the Amhara body politic. So we have forces combining. The ENDF allow Fano, even now, they allow Fano to commit atrocities outside of Amhara region. Nobody's following them into Oromia region or into Benishangul Gumuz region. And the ENDF have been complicit all along in what Fano has been doing. In fact, they were cooperating, as we know, in Tigray, committing ethnic cleansing and other breaking international humanitarian law on several fronts: war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, I say, in Tigray. They've been responsible for ethnic cleansing in Wollo region and the Oromia special zone in Amhara region, for cleansing Kimant, Agao people from within Amhara region, ethnic cleansing of Oromo and Gumuz villages within the Metakel zone of Benishangul Gumuz region, and ethnic cleansing on a huge scale in the adjacent Wolaga zones to Amhara region, Horogudru and East Wolaga. The NDF have been committing acts of ethnic cleansing too in West Shoa, where Fano seem to be less active. They seem to they've conducted lots of raids there recently, but not the killing that they have been responsible for in Horogudru and East Wolaga. So we have two forces combined against the Oromo, and they were openly cooperating until recently. And then in August, when Fano objected to the government's absorption of regional forces into the National Defence Force, which was the plan of Abiy Ahmed, they reacted violently and they entrenched themselves in places in Amhara region, where the ENDF have been trying very hard to remove them by drones and ground attacks. So that's it in summary. It's they've cooperated against the Oromo, and now they're both still killing and clearing Oromo, despite the fact that they're killing each other now. I understand in the last few days there's been large loss of life in East Shoa in fighting between ENDF and the Fano terrorists. And no, the Oromo population has already been cleared from the Fantale district by Fano and Amhara militia. So the effects on the Oromo population in East Shoa, we don't know from the recent conflict, but certainly there's been great loss of life according to reports that I've received.
Yeah, let's look at this step by step. First, let's look at the activities of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces. The Ethiopian National Defense Force is it is responsible to protect the people, the constituents, the citizens. But in your report, and of course in our previous news, we have been receiving that the Ethiopian National Defense Forces are targeting Oromo civilians, and their actions are akin to the activities of terrorist organizations. Their brutality is unjustified. They target civilians, and when they execute civilians, their action kind of deviate from regular national defense forces of any other country. Why is at this moment the Ethiopian National Defense Forces practicing this kind of frequent civilian crimes on civilian population in Oromia region? What is the purpose? What do they want to achieve?
It's classic authoritative regime behavior. where the security forces are feared by the population rather than they give them security. What happens is instead of protecting civilians, the defense forces are the biggest reason for the killing of civilians. And it's done on the slightest pretext of, it's justified on the pretext of young people supporting the Oromo Liberation Army, which is just not, it is happening. Of course it's happening. Kero are leaving their homes in droves to join Ola, but the people they're killing are university students going back home for vacation, this sort of thing. They're not members of Ola.
That the government understand it is obligation to protect the civilians, especially the people who are in the government's custody. Those individuals are, they are at the mercy of the government already. The government can keep them, can prevent them from joining the OLA or any benefiting the OLA. What is the purpose of killing youths?
It's to terrorize the population. And as they announced years ago, Tessima, the vice president, to dry out the ocean to catch the fish, to kill the fish. And this is exactly what they're doing. It's a blunt, indiscriminate tool of oppression. And so youngsters are frightened to venture into the countryside. The appearance of towns is different now because of the number of youngsters coming in from the countryside to escape from these roving people from military command posts who just seem to pick on youngsters and kill them. They have tallies and they're given awards at command posts for the number of young Oromo men they kill as Kero or as suspected Ola supporters. And it's, well, as I say, it's in a different division compared to what was happening under the EPRDF. And the brutality of what is happening is very disturbing. We saw horrible things under the EPRDF, yes, but I've not seen people burnt to death at stakes. I've not seen people buried alive. I've not seen people flayed, their skin removed. I've not seen people decapitated and dismembered in front of their families. It's the degree and extent of the current atrocities that are so worrying, and against a background of almost complete dissolution of the country. The economy is in tatters. You can't get medicines anywhere. Oh, wait, most people can't. And you can't go anywhere. You can't travel. It's almost like the days of Haile Selassie when he was in charge of an empire that finished at the first checkpoint outside of Addis Ababa. So you've got troops in military command posts terrorizing the Oromia region, and you've got attacks by Fano in ethnic cleansing and attacks by the ENDF, who are cooperating in terms of some of the ethnic cleansing, but also their main focus is getting rid of drying out the ocean, as I say, to catch the fish. So anywhere that OLA have been active, it's likely that the government forces will take revenge against local village people, which is what we've seen over the last, well, since, especially since the beginning of 2022, where the numbers of killings has skyrocketed.
And who are the images that come to your mind when you look at this report? Several kids have been killed in the last few weeks and in the last months. Who comes to your mind when you look at this report?
Every time I finish a report, I am depressed. It's just recording the horrific events that are going on takes its toll. And as you say, how what stands out, it's the horror of it all and how depressing the whole thing is. Recently, we've and included in the report right up to the date of publication, we were getting reports of extrajudicial killings, and as you say, people executed in prison. You'd expect to be safe from execution while you're in custody of the government security forces. But just like in the Red Terror days of the Derg, people are being taken out of prison, executed, and their bodies left on the street or in the bush. And this happened as on the 4th of September, 4 youngsters were detained in Dembidolo. On the 8th of September, at least one of them, Danga Tena, was executed and his body found in Anfilo. The other 3, I understood that they had been executed, but this may not be the case. 5 people in East Shoa on the 9th of September were at least 2, 3 were executed. I thought all 5 were, but I'm receiving news that perhaps not. A farmer tied to a stake and burnt to death in West Shoa. That was by the ENDF forces. And that was around the same time. And then on the 15th of September, we had 34 people killed in Gida Ayana in Horoguduru district, Horoguduru zone, by Fano. And 2 Kero killed in Kelem, Molaga, just yesterday on the 17th, I've had reports. So it's ongoing. It's ongoing.
Well, now, generally, we'll come back to the obligation of international organizations such as the United Nations, Human Rights Council, the United Nations body itself, governments across the world, including the government of the United Kingdom, the United States government, their role in, highlighting what is going on and holding accountable the Ethiopian government and its forces, those responsible individuals. The United States, for example, when this kind of pervasive crimes are committed against a civilian population, they target the authorities of that country and immediately they impose some kind of visa restrictions, asset freeze, and the likes. In terms of Ethiopia, it looks like the the US has right now made a kind of a U-turn and tried to collaborate with the Ethiopian government and discuss. And mostly the focus is, of course, on the north of the country in Tigray, where more than 500,000 population have been perished in the war between the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and the Tigray Defense Forces. We'll discuss about what are the obligations of the global powers and the UN. But let's now discuss about the Fano group. You referred to them as the Fano brigades in your report, but based on the UN definition of what terrorists are, I have been referring to them as terrorists. UN described terrorism as an act intended to cause death or serious bodily injury to a civilian or to any other person not taking an active part in the hostilities in a situation of armed conflict, when the purpose of such act by its nature or context is to intimidate a population or to compel a government or an international organization to do or to abstain from doing any act. So by this UN definition, I believe that the Fano groups are no longer a militia group who are seeking certain objective to achieve certain objective to benefit their people in their own boundary in the Amara region, But I believe that now they have morphed into a terrorist organization. But global media as well as countries are yet to refer to the Fano group as terrorists and to focus them, to group them in the roles of Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the likes. When that happened, of course, the global perspective shifts and there would be a lot of focus, and probably that might change the dynamics, and especially it's beneficial for the population who are being affected. So you refer to them as the Fano Brigade. What motivated you to refer to them as brigades instead of terrorists? Or yeah.
There will come a time when we have to speak to Amhara organizations, including Fano. If we start off with labels of terrorists, that might make negotiations difficult. But you're absolutely right. It's not only Fano, but the Ethiopian government security forces are behaving like terrorists with complete disregard for civilian lives and safety. So you're absolutely right. Fano is a terrorist organization. Why is it not recognized as such by the international community? That is the fault of two spheres, I think. One, the international community does not want to hear. They have a vested interest in Ethiopia, and they poured money into that government. In fact, Ethiopian governments would not have survived without foreign aid since Haile Selassie's time, certainly not since the Derg. And the whole idea that Ethiopia is an independent country that's able to go it alone is nonsense. It's been dependent on foreign aid since the 1970s. So the international the international community are at fault for ignoring the warning signals about Ethiopia. But two, the Amhara disinformation, the media brigades, if you like, there's a very strong and active disinformation propensity within the Amhara diaspora and in country, of course. And we see this again and again with false claims of atrocities committed by, they say, Ola. I can think of several that were blamed on Ola, which we proved to be nothing to do with Ola. They've been perpetrated either by Fano or militia behaving or acting under the auspices of the ENDF. This disinformation is very powerful, and we have lots of examples now which we've exposed on the OSG website: the Tole massacre, the Agamsa massacre, Guliso. And despite our efforts, the international community still seems to regard Fano as equivalent to Ola in terms of fighting a justified war against oppression, which, as we know, is not the case in the Amhara region.
And in your report, you also you reported hate speech among factors that are contributing to the horror that's being inflicted upon the civilians. And you mentioned two of the Amhara nationalists in your report. And one such person is Dr. Debru Negash. And it is written as, it was described as a physician pilot and an academic who served in the United Nations as a senior medical advisor in an online article, an online web page called Burkina. And when he wrote a polemic against Lawsome America and Abiy Ahmed in July 2021, on June 10, Dr. Negash had a short presentation appeared on Twitter. In the 37-second excerpts of the presentation as special guest of honor at an specified event, he says in Amharic, to be as heroes as Amaras, Tigray and Galla are creatures that kill Amaras and drink blood. Tigray and Galla inferiority complex has no limit. That inferiority makes them like this. As I always say, these guys should have shared Amara's great mentality as humans, but they have no ability to do so. They cannot be humans, rather they relish to kill. We can only get rid of these people, and we cannot train them. We must get rid of them. All Ethiopians should give it up. If we all are determined, we can do it within a short period of time. So, Mr. Gabru Nagash worked for UN as a medical advisor at some point, but he is currently funding a genocide and hate mongering against the Oromo and against the Tigray people, and he calls the Amhara people to rise up and to kill these people. And he said we can't train these people, and I don't know where he brought that from. He says they relish killing people and drinking blood. We have never seen in Oromo culture or an incident where this has happened in my lifetime.
Of course not. This is pure hate speech, and it's invented invented atrocities. But this is not new. We've seen this sort of speech before from former Derg army officers, from current serving officers in the ENDF. You've seen Fano militia recruiting campaigns and marches led by an American who went over there saying Ethiopia, oh, Amhara, oh, Fano, oh, and all raising their fists at every, well, it's reminiscent of the 1930s in Germany, the speeches made by Adolf Hitler there. The power of the Amhara disinformation machine is very worrying. And although we see videos of Fano committing awful atrocities and the evidence of hate speech that we see, despite all this, there are still the majority of American politicians believe that the Amhara media disinformation, that the Oromo are the terrorists and the Amhara are the good guys. There was a YouTube expert, Woronomics, is it? Chap called Simon Whistler, which I saw a 20-minute diatribe on YouTube just recently. And he was speaking very authoritatively, as though he was a real expert, and saying that Ola had committed acts of ethnic cleansing, which has never happened, and that Fano were forced into Oromia region as a matter of self-defense against Ola. Can you see the distorted logic in that? If you look at the areas where violence is occurring in Ethiopia, just look at the areas where it's difficult to access to give aid. Look on the OCHA sites. That it's the areas surrounding Amhara region that are broiled in violence. The only area within Amhara region until the recent attacks by the government against Fano were in Wallo, in the Oromia special zone, where Fano and ENDF forces were trying to wipe out the Oromo there. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting the sun in my eye here, so.
Is there any government or non-governmental body that monitors this kind of hate speech and rhetoric, especially arising from those who are based in Western countries like the United States or European countries. You also mentioned about Theodoros Terfe of the Amara Association of America, who went on Al Jazeera and where was vouching for the Fanos and predicting that they would defeat the Ethiopian National Defense Forces.
Yeah.
These are among the group, and then there is a media who found
The
who.
Association of America are responsible for some of the grossest episode and incidents of disinformation, and they're the first to claim genocide. This aggressive victimhood that they've learned from the Israelis, I think. They're aggressive victims. They portray themselves as victims, and they do this in a forthright, aggressive way, and therefore justify their own acts of human rights abuse.
Just
This whole thing depends on a racist ideology that Oromo and the other peoples of Ethiopia are inferior to Amharas. That's basically the problem. And this is from the old colonial days, and it's perpetrated now. You see this and it's assumed also by visitors who have absorbed the Amhara mentality that they are the saviors of Ethiopia and the rest of the people are uncivilized peasants who need direction, need to be looked after in this paternalistic way.
And it surprises me sometimes. Sometimes they act as if they are superiors and they are, out of this world. And even not just compared to the Oromo, the Tigray, and other people, even compared to the Western nations, they brag about Ethiopia being a colonized African nation, while we know that Ethiopia is an empire, and Abyssinia colonized the rest of the nations in Ethiopia, and then they sometimes say the Oromo invaded Amara and migrated upward and occupied our land and blah blah blah. So their description of about who they are is not consistent. It changes based on what they want to disseminate.
The only thing that unifies them is hatred of the Oromo, which is a shame. Unless we can get rid or ameliorate this xenophobia, this racism, this idea of supremacy, of being better than others, unless we can get rid of that, the future for Ethiopia does not look good. The experts speaking at the conference this weekend of the Oromia Human Rights Group, Alex Deval, professor from Tufts University, and Professor Kjetil Tronvoll from Norway, they were most pessimistic. The unraveling of Ethiopia is truly alarming. As Alex has said at the conference and before, Abiy Ahmed inherited a state, dreamed of an empire, and will be remembered for having destroyed both. And this is the way it's going now. Unless we have internationally supported and independently mediated negotiations, including Fano, including Ola, including all the groups of people and stakeholders in Ethiopia's future. Unless that happens, then we're going to end up in situations which are reminiscent of horrible scenarios like Yugoslavia or Somalia or, well, God forbid, Rwanda. But the the disintegration of Ethiopia is almost inevitable. We're right at the brink, and unless forces can be brought to reasonable discussion with mutual respect, then it does not look.
Is it right that the global community, especially the US and any other nations, European countries, always want to protect the territorial integrity of Ethiopia? And when they talk about territorial integrity of Ethiopia, what comes to mind to me is that they just want to keep Ethiopia as is, regardless of what is happening to the people and what the people who are, being terrorized in Ethiopia are demanding for. Is that right for the U.S. and other nations to force on territorial integrity of Ethiopia and favor that? Vis-a-vis what the people want.
Of course, it's wrong, but don't look for any morality in Western foreign policy. It's purely their own vested interests that they act upon. And even with the debacle that Ethiopia has become, there are still advantages to supporting the government there in terms of control of the Red Sea oil shipping lanes and in terms of security in the region. So, but it's a very short-sighted policy. If you
let's go back to Go ahead.
Aha, yes, I recognize that map.
Yeah, so when we look at this map, you posted a version of this as well in your report. This was posted by Amara People Front headed by Esken Naga. That was recently established, but it's part of the Fano group, and their aim and dream is to expand the Amara region about 2 to 3 times in its present size, dwarfing even Oromia, Ethiopia's largest region. This is happening as we can see. They have, if I go back, we can see that they have claimed land from Tigray, from Oromia, from Benishangul Gumuz, from Afar, and they are fighting to establish either an independent state of Ethiopia. And when they do that, they want something, a benefit, they want to go with some kind of price. And it is something that they can really achieve, or this is going to remain dream? What do you think?
Well, they believe they can. The first map you showed, reportedly by the Amhara Popular or People's Front, that has been denied by some quarters, but the second map, the following pictures, were published by borkena.com, which is a medium that's respected amongst Amhara. And you can see that what was purported on to be APF propaganda is really their desire. As you see, Amhara region expands 2 to 3-fold at the expense of reducing Oromia to, well, less than a half of what it should be. And obviously reducing Tigray, taking Western Tigray too. Yeah, and it was desired, I imagine, that the Amhara elite wanted to regain control over the whole empire. But they seem to have realized that they cannot do this anymore. But they're still making claims to large parts of Oromia, especially Wolaga and Shoa and Western Tigray. They feel that they were cheated when the borders were drawn by the EPRDF in 1991-92 in the writing of the 1994-95 Ethiopian constitution. It could be that there may be some areas that do need to be reclassified in terms of what regions or zones they belong to. But this, to just blatantly claim that you own half of Ethiopia and then march as though it's your God-given right, that's not the way to do it. If you want to change boundaries, then it's by discussion.
And it feels to me they are like insane when they are, you know, fighting with everybody in that country except the other nation that are not contiguous with them. They are fighting with the Tigray, with the Oromo, with Benishangul Gumuz, with Afar, and also there are the Agaw and Command people, and they have their own forces, and they want independence or autonomy in the Amara region. But if they assert themselves their identity, Amara would even become less and less, even in the current Amara region. But still, they want to. I don't know if they want to send some kind of message that we are here and we can muster some kind of muscle. But it looks like delusional to me, and they know that they will never achieve this, but I don't know why they are pushing for this kind of propaganda.
What seems to inflame this is a sense of persecution, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you attack everybody around you because you fear them, then they will start to attack you. So Amhara region will be besieged by all the surrounding peoples, and this will be brought upon themselves by Amhara elites. Now, this is avoidable, and God knows we've seen enough killing and the reversal of development in Ethiopia. And it is time to come to our senses and talk to each other instead of this hate speech and ethnic cleansing. It's not the way forward, obviously. And our job is to persuade the international media that this is the case. And already it's beginning to happen. We see shifts in academia. People are realizing the history of Ethiopia has been missold to them in the past. Things are changing, but whether it will change quickly enough for Abiy Ahmed and Fano to be driven to the negotiation table, I don't know. What is going to happen is a big unknown. As I said at the conference, that Ethiopia has become a melting pot of mutually aggressive people in the background of economic collapse and an inadequate health service, education service. Everything's falling to pieces now. And if we're going to reverse that change, then we need to talk. If we're going to talk, we need the support of international negotiators and supporters. That's basically it.
Yeah, so one of the speakers at yesterday's conference, Professor Alex Dual, described about 5 states of a failed state, and when it comes to Ethiopia, and he described
that article was written in 2021.
In 2021, and even more so right now.
That was when the TPLF and Ola were in ascendancy, and they were controlling larger and larger areas, and it looked as though they were marching on Addis Ababa. But then the drones came. Abiy got the drones, and that's what turned well, as far as I know, I'm no military expert, but it seems that it's the use of drones that have turned the tables against Tigray and caused the TPLF to call a halt to the slaughter in Tigray. Now, I don't think that's going to work elsewhere. In Tigray, you had an isolated area that was not being supported at all from the outside, whereas Oromia and the other areas of Ethiopia where the ENDF are active, it's less likely to happen there. The population of Oromia is 40 million. The population of Tigray is 6 million. So there are limits logistically in terms of what Abiy Ahmed can achieve, even with the worst atrocities that he's conducting.
Yeah, I mean, history has taught us that, Derg was unable to obliterate the Oromo Liberation Front, Oromo Liberation Army, and TPLF, EPRDF tried over the 27 years, and they several times claimed they were able to put out the Oromo Liberation Army, and they have declared has gone not to come back. And the Oromo Liberation Army and Oromo Liberation Front have come back always stronger. And over the last 5 years since the revolution, the outcome of the revolution was hijacked by the OPDO. The Cairo group have all marched and joined the Oromo Liberation Army, and now they have expanded the Oromo Liberation Army 1,000 times. And at this moment, the government cannot defeat the OLA by any means. And like I said, it has previously been tried when the forces were even together. TPLF as well as the Ethiopian National Defense Forces was complete, and they fought against the Oromo Liberation Army, and they couldn't defeat the Oromo Liberation Army and eliminate it. And now they are splitted. They are no longer intact, and even most of the Amara forces have defected and joined the Fano. So there is a division there. The Ethiopian National Defense Force is not as strong as it used to be, anyways.
It's a three-way civil war.
Yep, it is.
Nobody can win. The best that Abiy can hope for is to sufficiently reduce the power of Fano and Ola so that they become guerrilla movements. But he will not get rid of them. And
yeah, I think that's his hope. Like,
he'll be beset by people wanting to fragment his empire. And the longer he goes on, the more likely that empire is to fragment rather than to survive in any way.
Yeah, I believe for Ethiopia, for the Ethiopian people, especially for the Oromos and other oppressed nations, the global communities, global power should listen to the people and allow the people to exercise national self-determination through a referendum that, just like it happened in Sudan, and where South Sudan became independent, and as it happened when Eritrea became independent. The global community should listen to the wishes of the people and allow the people, support the people's struggle for independence. And that way, I believe there can be some form of stability coming to the region rather than holding the people by force. And the civilians are always bearing the brunt of the atrocities every regime that comes to power inflicts upon.
Yeah. Well, all the people of Ethiopia want peace, and it's not beyond man's capability for that peace to be brought about. All we need is negotiation and mediation. But this has to be on a level playing field where We have to get rid of this zero-sum dominant politics, which have beset Africa and Ethiopia for so long. That's the turning point that we are at, and it really is a cusp. Now, we could descend into chaos and genocide, or we could rebuild either a federated Ethiopia or separate countries. I don't know. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And economically and developmentally, it'll probably be better if there was some sort of central authority in Ethiopia. But whether this is feasible now that the amount of ethnic hatred has reached such a height is difficult to predict. I would like to see mass education programs about the different peoples of Ethiopia so they can learn about each other and respect each other. But who's going to do that?
That's very difficult, especially when a group tells you that they are superior to you and they want you to be like them. And what we learn from them is killing and slitting throats and, targeting civilians. And if they want us to be like them, they want our people to do that, I think. And you can't think they know everything and they are better than you.
Then everybody loses in that scenario. Yeah. So we have to hope. Without hope, well, if you say there is no hope, you guarantee there is no hope, as Noam Chomsky said. So
yeah, and
then in a few weeks' time and see some positive changes.
Of course, we should hope. We can't be pessimistic, and we hope that whether Ethiopia is integrated or not, I believe that a better environment will appear, stability will come, people start to breathe a freedom, air of freedom, peace in that region. Hopefully that will happen. You can't keep nations together by force, and also while doing that, torture the population, terrorize the population. And Yugoslavia is one example, and disintegrated, and nations still exist.
And places often with foreign interference that so okay.
So in your report, you also highlighted malnutrition as an outcome of the ongoing civil war.
Rates of malnutrition amongst, especially in the internally displaced people camps in Ethiopia. OCHA gives the Office of Community and Humanitarian Affairs in Ethiopia gives a lower estimate of the number of people in IDPs than we've obtained from investigations on the ground. It seems from our informants that there are 1.5 million IDPs in Oromia region and 1.2 million in Wolaga alone, in the 4 zones of Wolaga. So the malnutrition rate amongst those is alarming. We have, I think, global acute malnutrition rates of 19% in southern Oromia, but also elderly people who are not being counted. People are all justifiably concerned about women and children, but the old men seem to have been forgotten. They're discarded and sitting on the ground, surrounded by nothing, having lost all their farm, home, property, and their children and their children's children. one old man who was interviewed, and he's there with a single granddaughter, a 9-year-old granddaughter. All of the rest of his family, all his goods, farm, property have gone. They've either been killed or they've joined the Oromo Liberation Army. No, it's
when it comes to displacement and looting, it's not even limited to the Fanos. Fanos have been known to do that. Even the Ethiopian government troops have also displaced people. They have looted cattle, for example, 100 cattle, 50 cattle from people.
They've worked together. The ENDF and Fano have worked together against the Oromo. It's only recently that they've been fighting each other. And yes, the ENDF have been responsible for ethnic cleansing in West Shoa, particularly. Anyhow.
So finally, when we come to the global nations, I pointed out about the role of government. It's the role of the United Kingdom's government, European nations, European Union's government, the UN, the US, and many other international communities and governments across the world. What is their role in, holding those who are responsible accountable? We have identified two perpetrators: the Ethiopian National Defense Force and the Ethiopian government on one side, and the Fano terrorist groups, non-governmental group on the other side. And what is the role of these governments? So when we look at your report, and you are just beginning to disseminate, you have published it on your website and you have shared among people, and we have received, you have sent it to media, I hope. And what is the dissemination? What does the dissemination look like right now? Who are you sending it to? And what do you expect the reaction of those who are receiving? Are you sharing it with governments as well?
We're sharing with individuals within individual governments, as well as broadly publishing it. And the effect is minimal. Very few people read the report, including supporters of OSG. The information is there and it must be used. So governments are ignoring us, and they will continue to ignore us until they have to listen to us. We're nearing that point, but we're not there yet. And we're still hammering on their doors. The UN investigation into Ethiopia it's being decided this week whether that is going to continue. The ICRI, the Independent Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia. It's of paramount importance that investigation continues. Apart from organizations like ours, it's the only way of getting information out. And it's the only official reportage that's come from within the hardest areas to reach of Oromia region. So I don't expect much from the international community, but what we hope for is understanding, and for them not to be fooled by this massive disinformation machine that's active, and then to drag them to persuade them to allow us an equal footing at the negotiation table. That's all we need.
Yeah, it's the information is out there, and they can't escape responsibility, like a complicity, if they have access to this report. and they don't at least condemn what is going on, what the Ethiopian government forces are committing and the Fano terrorist groups are committing. At least they have to condemn this. They have to recognize what is going on, because in Professor Alex Duval's article that he published 2 years ago, I think, he listed layers of a failed state, and among those are contracted contraction was one of those. And it feels like right now there is some kind of contraction where the government, there is some relative peace in Finfinne, but outside Finfinne, everything is going on, and then eventually we'll go down to the capital as well. It wouldn't remain as it is right now. And then it will knock on the doors of diplomats and embassies and the like. So I think eventually they have to react. I have seen recently travel advisories at level 3 or level 4 almost across major countries, including the US, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, many countries, Spain. And level 3 means there is a strong warning. They discourage any travel, especially to Oromia region, Mara region, Tigray region, and the likes. And now the last stage is the fourth stage. They do not travel, and now we are heading to that kind of grade. And when you get to that level, it will eventually affect any diplomatic communities and the staffs of government in Ethiopia. So I think it wouldn't be limited to affecting the Oromo civilians and Tigrayan civilians. Eventually, it will also knock on the door of diplomatic community, and they better react to this, I believe, and hold the Ethiopian government as well as the Fano terrorists accountable. The Fano terrorist group at some point kidnapped an Israeli senior person, and they held him for close to a month, I guess, and eventually they released him when they were confronted by Ethiopian troops as well as forces from Interpol, according to some information. They requested for about 40,000 US dollars to release, and they kept on the victim, and his experience was very, very bad. Eventually, he was released. He was lucky to be released. But this is going to happen, and so it is going to have international implication if this conflict is left to continue.
Well, let's hope the international community doesn't drag its feet so long that it waits until there is street fighting in Finfinne. Let's hope that we can get to the negotiation table before that happens, because if that happens, then that will put back development in Ethiopia by another decade or two.
Thank you so much, Dr. Trevor, for giving us your time. That's my last question. If you have a message for the international community or for our viewers, for our audiences, the floor is yours.
International community, that's simple. Just look at the evidence and listen to us. For the Oromo, Bilisuma Dufajira, it's closer now than it's ever been. And the present awful situation will probably get worse before it gets better, but it will get better. You cannot keep 40 million people down forever. We will succeed, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of blood, but we will succeed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trevor. Thank you for joining us today on Finfinne News Network. If you found this interview informative, please like, share, and subscribe to Finfinne News Network. and for more in-depth discussions on global issues and the current situation on Ethiopia. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.